This is ordinarily our general Holbrook Chamber of Commerce meeting that we have at Trios. We meet monthly. We've been meeting monthly for as long as I can remember. I was probably about 12 years old when we started meeting monthly. I do appreciate everybody coming out and joining us tonight. We've invited some of our members of the sister chambers, the Ronkonkoma Chamber and the Farmingville Chamber. And of course, we have a special presentation by our Sachem School Board and our officials from the Sachem schools this evening. The reason why we changed the agenda of our meeting this evening a little bit was because we felt this was a very important and pressing issue within our community, not only residential, but business as well. So that's why we decided to have the Sachem School District with us tonight, and we're very honored to have them as well as some of our government officials. Without any further ado, I would like to, though, bring up Denise from the Ronkonkoma Chamber. She's one of the presidents, and I would like her to speak a little bit about how things are in Ronkonkoma. And Denise, if you can come up and give us a quick, brief update and let the school board know.
I'll stay right here. I changed.
Even better.
I'm in a pair of jeans. But, you know, Ronkonkoma, it's a great community. It's a community of working class people. We have a lot of businesses in our current downtown, and a lot of them are, you know, they're hurting. They're going from week to week, and as a matter of fact, or month to month. And we recently sent out our dues notices, and some of the, a few of them wrote back they do not think they'll be in business for another few months. They just can't, they just can't, you know, afford, you know, their rent or, you know, the taxes if they're in a building. And it's just a shame because you just know these people and you've worked with these people for so long, and to see them out of business, it just, truthfully, I don't mean to be dramatic, but it breaks my heart. You know, to put any additional burden on the business or the residents would truly be a hardship to Ronkonkoma.
Thank you. Michael Wentz from the Farmingville Chamber of Commerce. President Michael Wentz.
Good evening. Just wanted to start off with a little bit of history of myself. I created the Farmingville Hills Chamber of Commerce in January 2011 because as a resident of Farmingville, I had noticed that we did not have an active chamber. And I knew in my heart that in order to have a strong community, it relies on the economy. It relies on the small local businesses. And that's what's going to keep it going. So that's why I stepped up and created the chamber. Our storefronts, we don't have a main street. We don't have a downtown area. We are sprawled out over a span of 4 or 5 miles on County Road 16. We have about a 20 to 25% vacancy. So in every single shopping center that we have, there is at least one empty spot. And that never looks good in a community. And when I talk to the property owners, the commercial property owners, the businesses that are there, they're all having the same issues. And it has to do with the taxes, it has to do with the economy and the residents that are coming in, the community that's coming in. They're not seeing their normal customers anymore because they just can't afford to shop there anymore. And it has nothing to do with their prices. It has to do with the customer. It has to do with the person, the resident that's walking in and saying, well, I can't afford to keep buying these products like I used to. So yeah, it's an everyday struggle. It's an every month struggle that we are always, as a chamber, as the directors and officers, we're trying to be in communication with our members to find out what can we do, how can we help, where can we step in, and you know, how can we all stay prosperous, how can we stay in business. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to expand a little bit on what's going on in Holbrook. Fortunately, we've been somewhat blessed with about a 10 to 15% vacancy rate. It's been a little bit lighter in Holbrook, thankfully. Maybe because Kevin and I have been president and vice president for 14 years, and we got a little bit extra hook there. But quite frankly, I haven't been able to grow the membership either. Retention has become very difficult as well. And it's purely due to economics. I mean, people just financially can't. They're struggling to stay in business. I was just in a greeting card store yesterday across the street from my establishment, Jelly Bean small card store, and he has to close. He just says, you know what, I've lost 20, 30 customers over the past year. People just can't afford to live anymore. They can't afford to live in the community anymore. And quite frankly, it really is having an impact. And you know, we wanted the school board just to understand that the businesses also are feeling that pinch as well. You know, I know we're all in this together, but we do support you guys. By the same token, the business community, they're having a difficult time as well. It's not, you know, the attitude sometimes is, you know, well, you know, they got a business, they can afford to stay, they're doing well. No. A lot of times we're supporting a lot of the residents. They're our customers. They're in here. I mean, if we have to lay people off, it's the same situation that's going on throughout the country. So again, just to echo the sentiments of my fellow chambers, and I wanted them to speak first. Holbrook too is also feeling a little bit of the pain. So again, we just wanted to let you know where we're coming from. So without any further ado, though, I would like to introduce my esteemed colleague and Vice President Kevin Guilfoyle to set the ceremony.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. Farmingville, Ronkonkoma, Holbrook, the entire Sachem community. Thank you, public officials, school district officials, school board members for coming also. We felt this meeting was important for a number of reasons. The economy right now is not good, and it doesn't look like it's going to improve anytime soon. Regardless of what you may hear and see on as far as the stock market, although it may help the teachers' retirement system, it's not really helping the average local person in our community. I'm looking at a situation where the school district is in trouble, okay? It's in trouble for probably a variety of reasons, and I've gone to almost every single school board meeting over the past several months. They have a dilemma, okay? Sachem School District educated my 3 children. I've been a resident of the district for the past 34 years, and I have nothing but good things to say about the district. The district, through no fault of its own, has lost state aid. There were situations where reserves had to be spent down. Obviously, business people who are in this room can certainly understand that costs have gone up. Healthcare, insurance, you name it, okay? It's a cost of doing business. Guess what? The school district has those same costs. Okay? That being said, I want to talk a little bit about Sachem. Maybe, obviously, all people in the community probably know a lot about Sachem. But Sachem has roughly about 15,000 students, Jim? About 3,000 employees, Bruce? Correct. Okay? Largest employer in our community. Okay? Very, very important. Many of the teachers, many of the administrative staff, many of the clerical staff, many of the custodians live in the district. Okay? They buy products and services from many of our members. Okay? This is an important thing. The school district is faced with some very difficult choices. Okay? They have to ride a fine line between balancing the students' benefits without too many drastic cuts, not cutting down on their services to the students, by at the same token being very sympathetic to the residents and business owners in the community. I spoke with Mr. Devine from the Islip Assessor's Office the other day, and he had given me an estimate that the business community in the Islip portion pays roughly about 30% of the tax levy. In Brookhaven, Henry, I think it's 26%, okay? That's a sizable amount, okay? Take into the consideration that many of those business owners also reside within the district, so they're going to be hit twice. Businesses right now are holding on by their fingernails, for lack of a better term. Whether it's Farmingville, drive down Portion Road, you'll see it yourself, 25% vacancy. And you know what? They can't afford to rent the space even if they want to do business because the property taxes are so darn high, okay? On top of that, we have a situation where we have people that say, okay, school district needs another increase. Guess what? I can't afford to retire here. I can no longer afford to live here, okay? The real estate signs go up, the people move out, we lose more of our customers. Luckily, Sachem community, you know, the people move in, the people move out because of its excellent reputation. But what is happening now is that Sachem, because of its excellent educational programs, are graduating students that are highly educated. And they should be applauded for that. But the only thing is, they're educating for people in North Carolina and Texas because the people can't afford to stay here. And on top of that, what happens is the parents of those students, either they follow their children down in North Carolina or Texas because they want to be close to their grandchildren, or they can no longer afford to live here because they can't pay the property taxes.
Well, first we'd like to thank you very much for allowing us to be with you this evening. And, you know, as the folks already said, I mean, we really are so proud of the fact that, you know, when we refer to the Sachem family, we don't use that word family too freely. You know, that family is our students, our employees, and our residents, and that certainly includes the businesses in the area. And nobody is more fortunate or blessed than me. I've been a part of the Sachem family for the past 30 years. Many of you, I've had the good fortune of working with you, and and knowing your children, and now your children are raising their families here, and, you know, I'm so proud to look around the room and, you know, it kind of makes me feel a little bit old, but there are people here now in different capacities who at one time were my students. So we are very, very grateful for that. And in this process, and as we answer your questions, and I hope, let me say this, I hope nobody leaves here tonight without every one of your questions being asked and answered. And we say this all the time, there is no bad question and no bad suggestion. We have been out virtually every night, probably since sometime in January, because our goal is that we dispel myths and misinformation and rumors, because those are the things that really work against us. And every year, you know, during the budget process, that's really our number one goal, is to make sure that people have accurate information so that they become informed voters come May 21st. So that's really our goal. As was mentioned, the greatest challenge we have is that delicate balance between continuing to provide excellent educational opportunities for our students and preparing them for college, career, the military, while also being sensitive to the needs of the taxpayers. And I really sincerely believe, even long before I became superintendent, I think the Board of Education and previous administrations have really done a fine job of maintaining that delicate balance. The challenge that we have now, and before I forget, I should thank very much not only Senator Zeldin, but all of our elected officials, because they have really been working hard with us, because the problem we have is not an expenditure problem, it's a revenue problem. For example, last year, I believe our expenditure side of the budget went up 1%, but we're facing an increasing revenue problem to help support the district and our programs. So that's really been the challenge, but all of our elected officials who are here have really stepped up and have worked closely with us and helped us, and they're trying their best to support us, so I really have to thank them for that.
There were a couple of handouts as you walked in. If you don't have them, they're on our website at sachem.edu. But just a brief history of where we were in the past in our finances and where we're moving to. The one document is revenue expenditure history. There's a cover sheet. I'll just briefly go through the second page. As Kevin and Jim were saying, our basic two sources of revenue, state aid, taxes, and fund balance in school district municipalities, or at home we call it savings account. The second page shows that we were receiving $101 million in state aid, no 506, and after Governor Cuomo's initial proposal, and we got nice increases, 110 million, 114 million, and then 809, when President Obama first got elected, during America's worst economic financial crisis, he made a commitment to give funds to education, the auto industry, Wall Street, and we were blessed. Sachem got over $20 million to sustain the educational program, provide services to the children for those 2 years. But in that same speech, he said there's a fiscal cliff. After this federal money runs out, not only to education, but to the Wall Street and to the auto industries, the states are going to have to figure it out on their own. And that's where we were when Governor Cuomo presented his first proposal. It was back to the same amount of money that we got in 05-06, $105 million. So that was our first dilemma. The property taxes, actually there's a chart like this, comparing Sachem for the last few years. The 5-year average has been 0.9%, less than 1% increase in property taxes. And if you compare it to all the surrounding school districts, and Sachem was always on the low end. In some years, we even had negatives. So how did we do it? How did we maintain the programs, maintain staff for the last 5 years? If our major source of revenue, state aid, has been cut back, and we didn't really increase taxes to the level, we dipped into our reserves, into our fund balance, to the extent of almost $32 million. This year, after using the fund balance, we'll have approximately $550,000 left. And our total budget is about $300 million. So virtually, we don't have additional money in the bank to offset that. This next page, which I'm not going to go through, but this is our 20-year audited financials. The state control audits our accounts. The New York State Department of Education audits our account. We have 3 separate auditors that come in every week to audit our accounts. This is the information, so there's a fine line about giving information to the community, but yet providing and showing that there isn't more money in our accounts than we are willing to reduce taxes or provide services. We basically have tapped out, and now we're in a different mode of budgeting. So where do we go from here? Yesterday, or last week, the New York State Legislature, and as Jim mentioned, great thanks, Senator Zeldin, Flanagan, Al Graff, they restored $2.5 million to Sachem, but they went further. They gave us an option to create a loan for our pensions to lower this year's budget, and it seems like the board is going to take that option. So we're able to, where we were a couple of months ago, it's almost a 60% tax increase with just rolling over our budget. We're closer into the single digits, about half, about 8%, and we're going to bring it in lower next week. As Kevin mentioned, the board requested a couple of different scenarios. The budget doesn't have to be voted on by the board until April 17th, so we have a little time. But Senator Zeldin absolutely worked very hard, and Al worked very hard on behalf of everybody in the community. But on this one document, this goes on the various tax scenarios on how we could get a combination of accessing staff while being sensitive to the taxpayers. And there's a point where we know that there's going to be a point of, we bring a budget back at zero, of course, but it would decimate the school district. We'd be laying off so much staff, it wouldn't be the same program as we have today. That's the dilemma that we're facing with, and it's not an easy choice. And as Kevin mentioned, some of these meetings go on for hours. As you know, they're not simple decisions. And every time we make a decision to cut some program, those parents, those children, they come up to the school board, they advocate for that specific program, because that's what they're involved in. So, and we don't want to have a fight of the kindergarten versus the football team, or the music versus the sports teams, because in that scenario, everybody loses. We want everybody to understand the value of the school district, the value of their homes, the value of the community. So that's where we are. That's the last information. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to email. All this is on our website. We respond immediately, pretty much. And Rob or Sal?
Could you just, before we get to us, can you just explain how the new budget process works? We put out a budget, if it fails, what happens if it fails again, and then we can get into, I think, what I both want to say something.
Right, when we started out at 16%, that was a total rollover of any staff member, any employee, or any service we're providing. And that's assuming the same revenue. When we actually got the governor's proposal, it turned into even a worse situation because he reduced the state aid. We were fortunate enough that the legislature restored some of those funds. But as part of that, they gave us an option for schools, actually not only Sachem, for all school districts. You can opt into this loan to take the one-year pension and you pay it out over a few years. It's in the back of the pamphlet. And they give you different rates. Of course, we still owe the money, but we're paying it back. It's like creating a mortgage or any type of loan at home. It appears that we're going to take advantage of this option to lower the taxes this year, and we'll pay it back in the future. So that's one of the options that the legislator had the forethought to say, what else can we do besides just giving back money in addition to state aid? And this happens to be on the teacher retirement system, which is for teachers administrators. There's also the employee retirement system, which is an option. We had to amortize the amount of money, same basic concept. Instead of paying the full amount this year, but to amortize it, lower the amount this year, and creating debt for the future.
Bruce, I'm sorry, the way that we put up a budget, if it fails, we put up another budget.
Right, oh, yeah, that's the point. This year is the first year under the 2% tax cap. In the past, when school districts have we could go out for multiple votes. This is the first year where if the first vote is defeated, we have the option for a second vote. If the second vote is defeated, it goes to a true zero. You're not allowed to increase the tax levy beyond the current year. So that further restricted the options that we have when we go to the community. And as you know, these are one of the few votes from the federal budget to state budget to the county budget where the community has a say of how much they're willing to pay for the services or the taxes that are raised. But if they vote no, starting with this year, it's called the 2% tax cap, but in truth, it's really not 2%. There are exclusions, and the pension being one of them. It's 2%, but you can add on, if the pension goes above the 2%, you take that difference, you add it on. So it really is about, for us right now, it's about 3.5% increase. And then if that's defeated by the community, it's a true zero, and that's where we would have to cut significantly, if that's the vote of the community.
Just, in years past, the way budgets used to run is that if it went out and it failed the first time, we had the option of lowering it. And then if it went out and failed again, the district actually can increase the budget somewhere around 4%. With a 2% cap, everything kind of changed. Okay, everything changed drastically, actually. Basically, with the cap plus your exclusions, if you try to exceed that, okay, you now need a 60% majority vote. And that's what makes it real difficult for us, because in years past, as Rich mentioned, go back, we had a 0.9% tax levy increase. I've been on the board since '06. Okay, we had 3 years zeros, actually 1 year negative, with a 0.8. You know, and then what happens is that when our reserves started to be depleted, okay, we started getting the 4% range. Last year, well, for this current school year, last May, when we put our budget out at 4.49%, and our budget passed by 18 votes. The history of Sachem, if you go way back, our budgets have never, a budget of 5%, higher than 5% has never ever passed in the Sachem School District. We've never been able, you know, going back, it's never passed. But we don't have that contingency anymore, so we really rely on state aid, okay, and the minimum we're able to tax, you know, the community, which is, like I said, at 2% plus your exclusions. Our cap this year, okay, is 4.91%. Okay, so it's a little bit under 5%. With the pension smoothing, if we opt into pension smoothing, okay, obviously our exclusions drop, okay, and now our cap comes somewhere around 3.2%. You know, when we started this task, you know, of course we followed the incumbents report very closely. Every month we received one, and we knew going into the school year that we were going to be looking at a $9 or $10 million shortfall. We got our TRS bill from the state, which increased $6 million. We're now at $16 million, and then the first runs of the governor's budget actually is a $2 million reduction. Next, you know, we all of a sudden we're at an $18 million shortfall just to get to our cap number. Because of how the law is written now with budgets, if it fails twice, there's no more contingency, it's zero. And for us in Sachem, it would have been a $26 million loss, $26 million of cuts and reductions, which we can't absorb. We couldn't possibly absorb. We would lose everything. And as Mr. Singer said, it would change the face of how Sachem looks for a very, very long time. There were school districts back in '91 where you had a mid-year cut that lost music groups that to this day have not been able to reinstate them because of the cost associated with it. You know, and that's the dilemma that we faced. As Mr. Singer said, going into this 16%, I can tell you that the board meetings have been grueling. We've had people advocating for many different groups, but the board was committed to making any reduction that we had to make to have the least impact on students, because that's our number one custom. And of course, trying to balance the budget so that it was also community friendly as much as we can. But when you're looking at $18 million, $26 million shortfall, it's very hard, you know, to go back to where we were at zeros or 1.6% or 0.8%. We just don't have the reserves. On the reserve fund balance, we should have about $12 million in that one fund balance. We have about $570,000 because over the last couple of years, in order to maintain services for the children, okay, sports teams, corporate clubs, okay, we had to dip into that. You know, once again, in anticipation of additional state aid, it didn't quite develop the way we liked it to. We're going to continue to certainly beg and plead Senator Zeldin, Senator Flanagan, and Mr. McGrath, so that we can get back up to levels where we're not facing this STEM environment. That's it.
I think a couple of things is worth just saying, just because we hear it a lot, so we'll answer a couple of questions up front. And one, if you look at our past history, I think we've got a history of pretty good transparency and doing the right thing for the community. And I say community, not the residents, not the businesses. I say community for that reason. When we didn't need money, you can look at this chart, you can see we proposed a zero, we proposed a negative, we went out with a 1 or a 2%. There were districts that didn't do that. When we didn't need the money, we didn't take it. We could have taken it and grew the program, it would have made these cuts much easier now because we've been cutting just what we added. And I think the way we did that was really working with our community, our administrators, our legislators to get the most aid and do the most with it. Our administrators and our staff have worked pretty hard, very hard. You know, but before it was popular for teachers to take freezes, our teachers opened up their contract and they took a freeze. They opened up their contract again last year and they gave back $5 million. Our administrators took freezers. Everybody has done this, and these are all popular things that are out there in the community that say, you know, why don't the teachers take this? Why don't the administrators done that? We did that when before it was cool and hip to do it. And we're in this situation now where you can only go to the well so many times. And we're trying really hard to be very sensitive to not only the taxpayers, but the students. The students that we're talking about, the things we're talking about cutting are not really fluff things. They're the things that make a school a community, part of our community. They're things like the athletics, the music, the drama. All you guys support the drama and the music and the athletics. You're out there. We see your sponsorships all over the place. Those are the things that make Sachem a community versus just a school. Those are the things that are helping our kids get into colleges, helping them stay off the streets to keep the property values up, and really providing that atmosphere that people want to move into the district as opposed to moving out and having more vacancies. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, as Kevin said earlier. You know, Jim can tell you the district where he's from, he's the other side of the news. You know, they went through this and they didn't have a good outcome a couple of years ago, and their community is nothing like the Sachem community or Sachem family. It's not that tight-knit. I don't know if any of the residents ever came to the rally we had a couple of weeks ago, but it was the most amazing event. We had over 2,000 people show up just to celebrate what Sachem is. It wasn't a political event. It wasn't, you know, it was just to celebrate what Sachem is and to see all the different groups there performing and just demonstrating what they are, whether it be a club, the music, the athletics, was outstanding. And we watched them all perform, and that was fantastic.
Yeah, just a short comment. Some of you who don't know me, this is my 30th year on the school board. We've, and some say schools and budgets run in cycles. Well, the last time I remember this type of cut happening was in the early 90s, when at that time we lost about $11 million. I think Mr. Nolan remembers. It was a tough time for Sachem. But my point of that comment is that it took us almost 5 to 6 years to get back to where we almost were. And a statement was made, when you cut a program, it's very difficult to get it back. Well, consider 5 years of a student in a school district. It could be his whole senior year. When those kids do not have those programs, they graduate without those programs, and they lose what they could have had. And that's what we try to eliminate. We try to get these kids ready to graduate and to work. And it's very difficult when you start to have to cut programs, and in that time we had to cut everything. We were on austerity, I think, Jim, for years after that, and we had nothing. And those kids graduated without what they could have had. They didn't have it. We don't want to see that now. So that's why we haven't proposed it yet, but we're trying to keep at least a majority of what we have. And it's going to be difficult because it ultimately falls on the taxpayer. And I get it, I've gotten it for years. We can't afford it. We understand. I pay taxes. I'm in Brookhaven. Sometimes Brookhaven gets the most. But you know, I've graduated 4 children from this district. They're all doing well from what they have. So it's going to be difficult, and we're going to try to get the lowest we can, but we're going to try to keep the programs. And the taxpayers will let us know. On May 22nd, I think it is, the budget vote, that's when it'll come down. But again, we're going to try to keep it as voter friendly and taxpayer friendly as we can.
So it's nice to be back. I spent about 4 straight weeks up in Albany with my Senate and Assembly colleagues, and it's just great to be back home. The governor puts out his executive budget each year somewhere between the middle of January and the beginning of February. So this year, at the middle of January, he put out his executive budget. When he puts out his executive budget, school aid runs get issued. And if you look at the school aid runs, there's over 700 school districts in New York State with the mission of trying to figure out what the formula is that was used to come up with all those numbers. You're wasting your time, because there's no one in this room, at this table, in Albany, or my colleagues in the legislature who know what that formula is. Then there is a very political process that takes place where, regardless of political party, almost it's more by region, you start a very parochial battle to regain aid. What Senator Graff will experience over the Assembly is a very New York City driven focus on restoring cuts to that school, to their schools. What you'll see more on the Senate side is a very parochial battle amongst leadership, trying to get money driven to the suburbs and the rural parts of upstate. Regions will form coalitions together. Sometimes we're fighting against each other, sometimes we're working against each other, but in the education battle, you see Long Island, Hudson Valley, Capital Region, Southern Tier, North Country, Western New York, working together to try to restore aid. The Senate and Assembly each puts out one House budget resolution, and then we spend a couple weeks trying to come to an agreement between the Assembly and the Senate so we can pass a budget on time. And this year, there's three main battles as far as education aid went. The top battle for us, and the one that would help out Sachem the most, was a battle over something called high tax aid. The governor recalculated the way high tax aid was distributed, which resulted in his budget proposal in a loss of about $2 million. That's just one particular school district. There was about a $50 million cut statewide, but out of that $50 million cut statewide, $2 million of that was just the Sachem School District, about $38 million of that Long Island. The second battle was with something called GEA restoration. And this is something that benefits our various coalition partners in other regions of the state. It benefits Long Island, and it benefits those different counties and regions upstate that I referred to earlier. But it doesn't help anyone out a lot. It helps everyone out a little bit. And that's what Sachem experienced with GEA restoration was a few $100,000 more, $200,000-300,000. I don't remember the exact number. The third was $400,000 more. Okay. And then the other is the governor after he put out his executive budget, he recalculated building aid, which, as an example, I don't know the numbers offhand for Sachem. What I do know offhand, Al knows. He'll come in. What I do, I know the numbers offhand for William Floyd. They were going to get a mid-year cut of about $900,000 that they weren't expecting, and then $800,000 next year. So using that particular school district, that was a $1.7 million hit. So that was the other thing we were trying to fix. The high tax aid we got completely restored. We got a GEA restoration for our school districts. And we were able to put off that building aid recalculation. For Sachem School District, of all the school districts on Long Island, where you have 124 school districts, they were able to see close to a $2.5 million increase. That sounds great, except they started this process with the governor's executive budget of an increase year to year of $9,000. $9,000. Now I have other school districts. I represent Brentwood and Central Islip. Brentwood's complaining to me as well. Well, the governor's executive budget had an increase for them of $12 million. So when they were upset with the final product, I told them, well, just to put a little perspective on it, you're upset about being increased by $12 million. Sachem was getting increased $9,000. So let's put some perspective on it. Short term, our goal was to increase the bottom line as much as possible. There's one other thing we're working on. I spoke to Senator Flanagan twice today. We've been in contact, and I see Senator Boyle in the back. Senator Flanagan spoke with Senator Skelos today. We are pushing for something called bullet aid. And there's an opportunity, hopefully through bullet aid, to be able to provide a decent size boost similar to what we saw, I guess, with the GEA restoration. There is not an exact number of what we're going to be able to secure, but I'm confident that we're going to be able to secure additional funding through bullet aid. That's something we're lobbying hard for, and so that will assist. Long term, from a state aid perspective, we need to have more consistency in the way New York State distributes education funding. There is no reason why any school district trying to budget for years down the road should have absolutely no idea how much funding they're going to get next year or the year after. We know next year that New York State is going to increase state aid again. It will be, to the tune of $700–800 million, maybe a little bit more. But Sachem does not know, and all my other school districts don't know how much of that increase is going to come to them. And that's why all of us are advocating for an overhaul of the foundation aid formula so that there's more consistency. We have about 13 to 17% of the state's enrollment and attendance on Long Island. I believe that we should be getting that amount of state aid every year. And it should be consistent. Whatever formula we come up with, it should be consistent so that within that region, the money is getting distributed appropriately. I believe that there should be an added emphasis on lower income, high need school districts because they're the ones who actually experience less graduation and attendance rates, so they should not suffer because of that. We should actually be investing in them to get their graduation and attendance rates up. So I believe that the formula should be overhauled, and I also believe that we should have significant mandate relief. Every year, this year, as actually Bruce was talking about the pension smoothing proposal, which will assist this particular year. There are a lot of unfunded mandates in Albany. I believe that if something is so important that you need to mandate it, you should fund it. If you can't fund it, then you should not mandate it. There's opportunities for significant relief through federal statute, through state laws, through state regulations, and all of those unfunded mandates end up adding up. So that's one other way that we can help long-term from a state level. Also on the federal level, there have been a lot of inconsistencies as well. You've seen changes with Title I funding, and we had a stimulus package for a couple of years. There were hundreds of millions of dollars coming to New York State. That ran out. So that inconsistency has also hurt our local school districts. The rally was a success because up in Albany, in the halls of Albany, people were talking about that rally. It was effective. It was positive. People wanted to help Sachem because of that rally. And I thought that was a great idea on the part of the administration and the board to put that together. But I know, as I can tell you as an outsider, I know, understand, and deeply respect the pride that this community has for your school district. And that rally showed many people, not just internally, but showing people in other communities just how much you care about your school, the music, the arts, the sports, and it's really a credit to all of you to be there for that particular event and to be here tonight to discuss these important issues. So, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, the bad thing about going after Senator Zell is he always steals my speech. With that said, look, we've been working hard. I know the school board, we've been in contact constantly. One of the things that I felt excited about this year was when we were going to debate the original one-house bill of the budget. We're up in Albany. I had my aide call the school districts, all my school districts. And while I was debating it, I actually had communication with my school districts while I was on the floor of the assembly, because they were doing group texts, and that was getting forwarded to me. So that was an experience. And there's a lot of things. Look, we try to bloody them up on the floor. Like my job in the assembly is to point out different aspects. And one of the things I really had a problem with was, and this is folks, the governor, when they made them do these teacher evaluations, which is a mandate, okay? They told the school districts that we are going to reimburse you for these teachers' evaluations. But he didn't put it in the budget. And he didn't put it in the budget this year. So, I mean, there's a lot of fights on the horizon as far as still trying to get all the resources and still trying to get all the money in. But there are some things we have to fix on the state level, and maybe we can start working on that once we get back up there on the 15th. But I had a real problem with the governor making a promise or forcing them to actually do the evaluations or they lose funding, and promising to pay for the funding, and they never do it. So, I mean, we've been promised mandate relief for 2 years. We're getting dribs and drabs, but nothing substantial. So there's a lot of, look, the fight's gonna continue, the fight's gonna keep going on. They're gonna be fighting in the Senate, they're gonna be fighting in the Assembly. You know, one thing with the teacher evaluations that I made quite apparent was the city of New York didn't even do the teacher evaluations. Okay? And then they try to say, well, they got fined for it, or they hit for it. But what they did is they say, okay, we're gonna take away this much money, but then they put the money in another pocket. Okay, so they took money out of one pocket and they put it in the other pocket. So the city really didn't get hurt, in my opinion, for doing it. The one thing I'll say to you is we get on the floor, we fight over this, we have our debates and everything else, we send red flags to the Senate, and the Senate did a great job in fighting to get that $2 million back, plus the other $400,000. And I can't say more, we're very fortunate because we have one of the big dogs in the room. And the big dog in the room is Senator Flanagan, who leads the education committee. And, you know, the Senate fought on their side. We fought on our side, we fought to bring things up to the surface. But I've got to give Senator Flanagan and the Senate credit for really fighting hard to restore that $2 million. I think we should have got, you know, more. I don't like the way it's funded. I would like to be able to sit here one day and say, this year I voted for the education portion of the budget. So far, no good. Hopefully next year. But anyway, with that, you know, I mean, Senator Zeldin went through a lot of the fights that went on, and a lot of the funding that went on. What really hurt us the year before were the cuts with the federal government. Even though we put more money in each year, that federal cut hurt us a great deal.
Thank you, everyone, for having both myself and my colleague here from Town of Brookhaven. Just a few observations, if I can. Our role here tonight, I think, is maybe just to help assist in answering some maybe assessment or taxation-related questions. I think the gist of the expertise as far as budget crafting and budget development, of course, goes with the school district and the school board members that have been with them for many years. Sachem is sort of unique in the point that it does straddle 3 local townships. The town of Islip, as you know, the town of Brookhaven, and in Henry's district, town, and the town of Smithtown. So this is one of the few districts, I think maybe island-wide, that does straddle 3. Our job is to value property. Our primary mission in government, as far as an assessor's office, is to value property, to place a value on every parcel of land, all 100,000, all 175, and all 40 in Smithtown in the respective towns, and place a fair value. We do that every year. We don't reassess, we'll do assessments every year, but we have what's called a level of assessment, which you'll see in your tax bill, and that will be a divisor that will help you determine what your full market value is. Assessments we provide on an annual basis. We send to the school district in the summer of every year with the summary of the final assessment rolls. The Singer could verify that out, and Ron Sachs, Mr. Sachs, which also works with Mr. Singer. That's a summary of all the assessed value for the town of Islip. Brookhaven is the same, as well as Smithtown. They do a lot of numbers crunching, and then they come up with their tax rates, blended tax rate for the entire school district. I was just doing some mental math, or some written math here. I did a little ranking of the tax rates for the 12 school districts within Islip, and Sachem is the 9th lowest. I mean, is number 9 as far as highest, 9 out of 12. There are 3 a little bit lower. One is Fire Island, which I would throw out because they're so low, because it doesn't exist. Brentwood, which is another large district, is just a hair different than Sachem. And Hauppauge, which has oodles of industry, you know, both on the Islip and Smithtown side, that helps supplant some of the assessed value concerns of the Hauppauge School District. So the rate that you have now, while it is, you know, it is expensive and everything else, and I'm not editorializing or saying it's good or bad, but there are 8 above you and 3 below you, so you're not starting out.
The mission of our office is to come up with and establish a fair and equitable role. It's not an easy thing to do. As Ron said, Brookhaven has 180,000 parcels, different taxpayers. Some of those are vacant properties, of course, but as things get developed and improved, we have to add them to the roll, and as people grieve, as they do. And in our town now, we're averaging about 30,000 grievances a year. And then they have the opportunity to go to what's called SCAR, which is small claims, over in Supreme Court with a hearing officer. They grieve they can challenge the decision of the assessment review board by going over to that to the small claims. That reduces the roll, and there are 3 figures that we have to be concerned with in local government. The levy, which is the level of money that's going to be collected for the purposes. And we all have had great things to say about Sachem tonight, and I certainly could go on for a good period of time, and I won't. But something that Mr. Falco mentioned, I graduated in 1981, as I said. There were 1,500 people in my graduating class. I doubt there are 500 on Long Island today. The levy is the amount of money that we want to, that government needs to function. And then there's a rate, and that rate is established based on the assessed value of the town. And as you can well imagine, our value in the town of Brookhaven through all of these grievances, that the value has gone down in the last couple of years in the town, which means you automatically get tax increases because the values have gone down. And to make the levy to raise the same amount of funds to run government, you have to raise taxes. Hopefully, we won't have to, now the town board has told us, and they've made a commitment to the public, and that they don't want to change the rate. So that means we too, in town government, as you heard from the school administrators and the board, we too have to do more with less.
Joe Storzinger has the questions for us. Sure. Joe, fellow Merrimack graduate.
That's right.
Sachem product.
2 girls in Sachem, 1 soon to be in Sachem, so very cool.
Joe, I think we only have 5 or 6 questions.
Well, we have about 9 questions.
9 questions,
9
not
questions.
bad.
The first one's to any public official. Year after year, Long Island continues to pay more in the state tax pool than we get back. School funding is a prime example. What are you doing specifically to change that?
Well, look, we've been yelling and screaming at the executive branch. We've been talking about redoing how we do fund schools and amount of state to make it even. It's a long battle. We're fighting not only upstate, we're fighting New York City too. Okay. Most of the people that watch my Facebook and watch my press releases, one of the biggest things that I fight about is that Long Island can't subsidize the rest of the state. But it's, you know, it's a battle. Look, we're not the only representatives. We're battling representatives from upstate. And what I can tell you is I lived upstate, so if you look at areas like the Adirondack Park, where they stagnated their ability to grow their economy, right, when they created the Adirondack Park, part of that was that they'd get more funding for their school districts. So it's an ongoing battle that we have, and you have a limited number of representatives on Long Island, and we're all fighting for the same piece, right, in different areas of the state, and each area has their own little fiefdom that they're trying to protect. So, I mean, we've been talking about changing the formula for years. Hopefully, we can get that done.
And this is for any school board member. Can they cut the extra money they pay teachers in the extracurricular activities? The funds that some classes get for the amount of time involved is excessive. Also, how about a nominal fee for the extracurricular activities paid by the student to offset the costs?
The first part is, as far as cutting, when a teacher receives a stipend for a co-curricular club assignment or an advisorship, it's something that's negotiated. You know, it's something that by contract you have to pay it, you know, a certain dollar amount. Every 3 years when their contract expires, okay, we revisit many different areas of the contract to try and make it a little, you know, a lot more efficient and whatnot. You know, in years past, a perfect example, this year, our teachers actually opened their contract a year earlier, okay, and they took a 2% reduction. They actually took 1% this year, but with deferred steps, okay, and deferred raise payment. It actually saved the district $3.5 million, but on top of that, all of the coaches and the advisors all took a freeze. So there was no increase, okay, in the advisorships. You know, so once again, I mean, it's how we alluded to before, is that's, you know, continuously negotiating, okay, with our bargaining units, and we have a very, very good relationship with our bargaining units, unlike in a lot of districts where, you know, they're fighting like the Hatfield McCoys, okay. Our bargaining units have recognized, okay, the needs in Sachem, and they have seen a reduction in state aid in the fiscal shortfalls that we're facing, and they've opened up their contract voluntarily work with us. So once again, we continuously strive to make the contract more efficient. Okay, if you look at our teacher salary line, it's down about $30 million over the last 6 or 7 years, mainly because when a teacher retires, okay, we try to you know not fulfill that position while keeping them stay within the board guidelines for class size and things like that. So, a couple of years ago, our teachers, as Sal alluded to before, well before Newsday was putting it on page 4 on the front cover that, you know, this district took a freeze, and this district, you know, these teachers took a freeze. Our teachers took a one-time $3,000 bonus. So over the contract, the 3-year contract saved the district $10 million. And when you looked out 20 years, okay, and you amortized that money, it was actually $60 million. So, never made Newsday, you know, never made Newsday, but once again, we continuously look at that on a regular basis. And because of our relationship with our bargaining units, okay, we, you know, sometimes we're able to work a deal where there is no increase. Or many of our elementary school advisors are doing clubs voluntarily. Teachers step up and saying, hey, you know what, kids want to do a garden club. I'm not looking for a stipend, I just want to do it. So, you know, we have some special teachers in our district that are willing to step up and do that.
Okay. I think the second part of that was about possibly charging for activities, a nominal fee to the student to offset
defer to
costs.
Bruce because I think the law prohibits us to pay to play. And I don't know if that covers that. I think because of
Once it's a school district operation, we're not allowed to charge parents. The school districts have opted, we read in the paper, where they're cutting out sports. Then the male and the female, or Title IX federal laws, that you have to raise the money, parents raise the money for both football team and girl field hockey, it has to be equitable. But that's the school district totally out of it.
Okay, so it has to be raised by those particular groups.
Correct, and we wouldn't offer it at all.
And the parents can't pay for it out of their own pocket.
No, that's illegal. That's correct.
Just one quick thing with PTAs, I mean, they do a tremendous amount within our schools to really offset the cost of many of the different events, whether it's field trips, a trip to an aquarium, or a trip to Brown Zoo, might cost $50 or $60. They subsidize it tremendously to, you know, to make it a lot easier for the residents, you know, parents.
Okay. This next question, I guess it could be part of, it says school board, but I guess maybe the public officials could interject. Why were increases in the past few years so low, and now 12%? I know you've reduced it a little bit, but this person said 12%. Wouldn't it have been better to spread that out?
I think as you said earlier, one, at the point with the school, when everything was very low, when we were putting budgets out to the community that we thought were fair. We didn't need money at that time. Our reserves were flush. We thought it was unfair just to take more money because we had to, because we could. As the economy turned, that was certainly not the right time to raise taxes on it. So again, when the economy turned and we lost our state aid, the first thing we did at the governor's direction was to use our reserves before we raised taxes higher. Again, nobody wants to raise taxes during a recession. It's just a double whammy. But the economy hasn't turned around. The costs are still low enough because the economy hasn't turned around. Things like the TRS, those reserves have run dry. There's no alternative. We can only get the money from two places. Now, our reserves are dried up. We need to get it from the state. They're lobbying for us. They're getting us what they can. The balance has to come from the community. There's no other place to get it.
The thing too you have to understand is that reserve accounts, once they're fully maxed, okay, the only other thing you can do with surplus money is really give it back to the community, and that's how we were able to achieve the 0% increases. Every couple of years, we get audited by the controller's office, okay, as many districts in Long Island do. And many districts have been calling the carpet because they create these reserve accounts as a mechanism to take more money, okay, put into those reserves account, and they get their hands slapped. Sachem, we didn't do that. Every one of our controllers' reports or audits that came back particularly, and it's really to the credit of the business office and the superintendent's office. But a lot of districts do that, okay, and we felt that we wanted to pass it back down to the community. In hindsight, we didn't know that if we were fiscally responsible to our community, that it meant that in 9-10 we would take a $16 million reduction in aid. We took the largest reduction in all of New York State. We went up to Albany, we had an assemblyman say, you guys really should be the model for the rest of the state because you've done everything the way it was supposed to be. Negotiating with bargaining units, maintaining employment, providing services to kids, and then all of a sudden we had to do a $60 million shortfall. And if you look at the chart, for 08-09, we received $119 million. The following year we received 104, the following year 104, the year after that 101, and at the same time, okay, as we had a reduction in state aid, our unfunded mandates are going up. They're going up considerably. So I mean, the APR that we talked about, literally the cost of $1 million to implement, but of the race of the top one at $700 million, Sachem received $87,000 over 3 years. So we can't even claim the $87,000 in 1 year to break it up over 3 payments. We cannot implement, APPR for that, $87,000. And these are some of the, the hurdles that we've been, facing. One of the things that Sachem has done in the past, we unfortunately can't afford to do it anymore, is that even when assessments were low because of people grieving their taxes, we always built into our budget, okay, some money to offset, so that if we said to the community, look, we're promising you a 2%, budget or a 1.6% budget. Okay, if assessments came in low in any one of the 3 districts, we stuck to our weighted average. Because I think the big misconception is people say, wait a minute, I voted on a 1.8% budget. My taxes went up 4%. Once again, we would use any surplus money or any monies to offset that. So if we said that we promised you a certain tax rate or a weighted average, we did exactly that. Unfortunately, we can't do that anymore. But very few districts do that. But we had, in good times, we had the ability to do that. Once again, to be truthful to what we promised.
Okay, this is for any school board member. Since we're having budget issues, why aren't we considering the sale of the administration building on Union Avenue in Holbrook?
We're working on it. Last night at our board meeting, we approved an appraisal to have the property appraised. At this particular time, although it's one of our oldest buildings, it's been in the district for many, many years.
1923.
1923. The thing is, at this particular point, we can't put students in there. We'd have to do tremendous upgrades to it just to make it student-friendly and meet the requirements. So, at this particular point, okay, we are looking, at possibly selling the property, selling that building.
Any school board member, also politicians, the New York State Controller's Office had implied that pension contributions for future years will no longer include the disastrous losses in 2008. Is there any ideas to the local benefit?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. The New York State Controller's Office has implied that the pension contributions for future years will no longer include the disastrous losses in 2008. Is there any idea as to the benefit? I think they're implying what happened with markets coming down.
There's 2 things we got to be concerned with. One is, that would be wonderful if it drops down and we don't have to fund it that much. But the other issue, we don't control. If they tell us how much we have to pay, we would be reacting with a much smaller check to them, or actually they would just take it out of our aid.
So we
The other
don't know
thing
what
we
that
have
local
to-
benefit is currently to the district?
No.
Okay.
We got to be cognizant of the TRS smoothing and the commitment we would make to future years as well, because if we take the smoothing, we're committing to certain payments in the future.
General question, what is happening with kindergarten in September of this year, 2013?
Right now, in the proposed budget, kindergarten will remain full-day kindergarten. If first, if for some reason the budget is not approved by the community, like everything else, we would have to go back to the drawing board, and that would be one of the things on the table.
Again, the school board, this is a couple questions. First thing is, how many students are we down from student enrollment?
It's funny because some of you children have come through over the years. In the mid-'80s, we were graduating about 1,500. Right now, combined between Sachem North and Sachem East, we're graduating about 1,200 at grade level. So has it gone down since the mid-'80s? Yes, but not drastically.
And the follow-up to that up would be, how much aid per child have we lost?
All the calculations are different. Like the aid is not just per child. There's textbook aid. So it's tough to say.
Okay. And what is the elected officials working on to assist in recovery of some of the funds?
Recovery of which funds?
I would assume the school aid.
So, last year or the prior year, we started doing two-year budgeting with education aid. So, in last year's budget, we increased aid by about $800 million, but we did a two-year budget of increasing aid for 13-14 at about $800 million, which ended up being just under $1 billion in the final budget we agreed on last week. This year, in this year's budget, we're doing another two-year budget. So not only did we increase aid by just under $1 billion, but we also are increasing aid by another $800 million for next year. So, when we came in, we were both elected in November 2010. The 2011-2012 budget, we came in, there was about a $10 billion deficit in the state. So that first year, it was a tough budget. Everyone felt a little bit of pain. Fortunately for the 12-13 budget, the 13-14 budget, and when we passed the 13-14 budget for the 14-15 budget, that's 3 years of significant aid increases. As was pointed out earlier, when you look back to 2008, 2009, we factor in those first few years of cuts. What we're doing now is just starting to get back to the levels from 2008, 2009, which directly answers your question. We're just getting to that point, and I would anticipate that we're going to end up honoring that increase in the 14-15 budget, and hopefully what we do in the 14-15 budget is a two-year appropriation that's also increasing aid 15-16. And when we increase the aid, when we say like next year we'll increase another $800 million, there's a new base. So that's $800 million on top of this year's $900-something million. So next year's increase is actually, $1.7 billion over this year. So it is compounded, and that's, I guess, the best way to answer your question as to how to catch up with the aid. The one point though that just came to mind when we were talking about cuts and making up for lost funding, we have been scraping at bone with education throughout New York State. We are cutting programs that for us, subjectively and objectively, when we define what qualifies as a quality education for our students, we think of music and art and sports and to have a well-rounded education. With Medicaid, we are spending well over $1 billion a week in Medicaid, and we are not touching fat in that program. So, if anyone, people say, the federal, the state government is broke. We just approved a $136 billion budget. We're not broke. We're generating, we bring in the revenue to pay. We have the highest taxes in the entire country, the highest individual taxes, the highest corporate taxes. New York State is not broke. We have money to fund education. The problem is that over 40% of that budget is going to Medicaid. And there really is a direct correlation between the two, because there's so much fat in Medicaid that can help pay for the cost of education.
One of the things what I do is reach out to the public, and I give you avenues to reach out to the governor's office, okay, and really get your voices heard. I've been doing that since I've been in office.
Al, could I add on that? Could you maybe tell the community business owners how we could go about, doing that and helping this process?
Well, I do have a website.
What things can we do?
Yeah, I have a website up where you can actually petition the governor. One of my biggest things is, I don't know if everybody knows Doug in the back, who's my aide. He's my computer guy. And what I found out the other day is I have the Commissioner of Education actually following me on Twitter, because every time him and I are in the same room, I wind up chewing him out. One of the problems that I have, and I think you guys agree with me, is they're forcing them to do certain things to get race to the top funds. But the things they're making them do, right, it's like spending $10,000 to get a $2,000 grant. So, I've been fighting, why are we still in race to the top? Okay, it's costing our school districts more to participate in this than we're getting in return. So I think there's a lot of things that I've discussed, and I've gone after the governor's office with too, as far as education is concerned. When you're looking at the teacher evaluations, that cost you a lot of money. When I went to school, we had a Regents diploma and a general diploma, right? We had a career track and an education track, and I think we got away from that. And you're going to put all this money into judging teachers on getting kids ready for college who aren't going to college, all right? But we're not giving them the opportunity to go towards the trades too. So, and this all took place before Lee and I were ever there. And one of the things I said to the Commissioner of Education was, once New York State got involved in education, they screwed it all up, So there's a lot of things I've been fighting to change what exactly we're making our schools do. And I don't think anybody on the school board would disagree with me about the race to the top funds. Okay, it costs you far more to implement it than you do get in return.
And the thing is, I know I mentioned this last night, whenever you hear the word opt-out, we actually had an opt-out. We had to decide in 2 days whether or not we wanted to participate in the race to the top money. We thought it would be fiscally irresponsible that we wouldn't go after grant money, because if you didn't opt in, you were not subject to any of the funds. After we had learned about what was involved, the opt-out had disappeared. So we were in every district. So the thing is, like I said, when you look at certain school districts, I know that we received 87 or 89,000 groups, but districts in comparable size to us received over $1 million. And really, whether you're evaluating 1,300 teachers in one district versus another district, because of the Commonwealth ratio, for reduced lunch, they actually did much better than us.
The next question is for Al or state official. Why is the lottery revenue increasing and our aid shrinking?
I'd like to answer that.
My first question that I had when I got to Albany after I got elected was about the lotto. I said, all right, now I'm in a position where I can get an answer to this question. And so everyone knows that the money that you make from the lottery is supposed to go towards education. So the money what I found out was the money that is generated in lotto does go to education. But the general fund that is used to help pay for the rest of the education funding is another pot. The general fund is another pot, and they essentially offset whatever is made in the lotto with just less money needed out of the general fund. So the lotto money goes to education, but it's an accounting game, because you'll just see less money come out of the general fund. So I'm happy to share that answer, which was my very first question I asked when I got to Holbrook.
And just to comment on that, I had spoke to my lottery agent, he told me that lotto is actually down. They did $8 billion in 2011, and they've dropped down to $7.5 billion in 2012. So revenues are not increasing, they're actually slightly decreasing.
Yeah, the example here was there's only about $2 billion that went to the education system, so understanding the accounting, I guess.
So they have administrative expenses that are.
This is Albany again.
Albany accounting.
Is that like creative accounting?
Very creative.
Question for Senator. What is the criteria that the New York State Assembly allocate budget for school district?
You ask that again?
What is the criteria that the New York State Assembly allocate budget for a school district? So I guess what is the criteria that the state gives to the
What's
public?
the formula?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right.
I am telling you
Yes.
honestly, I have absolutely no idea what the formula is. That's a problem.
Right.
And I, every single year, if you look at the governor's executive budget every year, let's go back the last 4 or 5 years, and then you look at the final budget, right around April 1st, last 3 years, right around April 1st, and you look at those numbers, you'll have a different formula with every single model that's printed. So I have absolutely no idea what the formula is to education.
Suffice to say, though, the dollars that Long Island puts up to Albany, we only get a fraction of them back.
I'll tell you to that point, so in 2009, let me make sure I get this right. Which year, with 2009 or 2010, one of those years was an increase, one of the years was a decrease. 9-10 was a decrease, 10-11 was an increase? Okay, so 9-10 was a decrease, and Long Island paid for 15, I think we got 15% of the decrease in 2009, 2010. 2010, 2011 was an increase, and we only got about 5% of the increase. So what's happening is that when money gets increased to education, we see less, but when money gets cut, we saw more of a cut. Now, I'm going to say I'm at risk of alienating anyone who will get turned off by something. I have to talk what might sound like partisan politics for a second. I apologize. There is a battle between chambers. Like as of right now, there's a balance of power where the state assembly is focused, not now, but Speaker Silver and the people who put him in office, his contingent from New York City, although his numbers are shrinking if you read the paper today, with people doing bad things. They're focused on the assembly. I'm sorry, the assembly's focused on the city. On the Senate side, there's a focus on the suburbs and the rural part of the state. What you saw in 2009, 2010, the example I just gave, was you had one-party rule in Albany. A Democratic governor, a Democratic assembly, and a Democratic Senate. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about Democrats. I'm not trying to be partisan. I want you to just understand the point. That what happened was the New York State Senate, when they were controlled by Democrats, they had the same New York City focus as the assembly has right now. And David Patterson was the governor. So you had a governor, an assembly, and a senate all focused by region on New York City. And that's why you saw Long Island get the worst, the MTA tax, we lost the star rebate checks, other stuff. Because there's a focus on the city. So a balance of power when it comes to education aid, you'll see numbers more equitable than you would otherwise. And I don't want it to sound partisan, it's really a geographic balance of power that's very important in Albany as far as us as a region. And that's why when it comes to education, on Long Island, Democrats and Republicans are on the same team. Whether you're the Assembly, Senate, Democrat, or Republican, it's a geographical battle. But I just wanted to put a little context and perspective on what happened those couple of years and why it was so disproportionate.
Yeah, and the way it's worked in the Assembly, the rural areas, a lot of times through our debates, and we'll get things first. Okay, so the Assembly will get it first, the Senate will get it second. And what we'll do is we'll debate on the floor and throw up red flags for the Senate to say, take a look at this, take a look at that. I mean, the budget here, we started debating at 11 o'clock in the morning, and we finally finished at 12 o'clock at night. So there was 13 hours of debate in the Assembly on this budget. So just to give you an idea, we go through it with a fine tooth comb, and we bring a lot of things out. And in the past, there's been a lot of times in the legislature where our job is the first line of defense, your rural areas, and the people in the Assembly, is to throw up the red flags to the Senate and go, take a look at, remember, we have 150 members. They have 60. So we have 150 eyes on this thing, and our job is to throw up red flags and hopefully get the Senate to make sure they focus on certain things too.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Property Assessors Offices of Brookhaven and Islip, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And certainly our Assemblyman Al Graff. Senator Lee Zeldin, our school board. Superintendent Jim Nolan, Stephen Singer, and our board. I want to thank you all for your patience this evening. Very informative meeting, and good luck to you all. Continued success.